Hello, I'm Emily Rhodes, and today I'm going to be talking to you about this incredible book, Mrs. Bridge by Evan S. Connell. This is the October pick for Emily's Walking Book Club, which is my book club where we walk on Hampstead Heath one Sunday a month and on in Regent's Park one Friday a month, and we also meet on Zoom on a Monday evening. So there are three different chances to meet up and discuss the book. There's also a weekly newsletter that I send out via Substack with lots more info about the book, kind of links to find out more, ideas for discussion points, and other things that I've been reading and enjoying. So that's emily'swalkingbookclub.substack.com. Do sign up if you haven't yet done so. I'm really excited to talk about this book with you and to hear all your thoughts on it too. It feels like a bit of a cult classic that people who've read this book are like, oh my God, it's amazing. You must press it into your hands. It's so kind of thin. It looks so nice. What a great cover. And it's not that well known. Surprisingly, actually, given that there's also been a film kind of adapted of it and its companion book, Mr. Bridge, which he wrote a decade later. He wrote Mr. Bridge a decade later, and then Merchant Ivory made the film, kind of called Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, combining them both. This book was first published in the 50s, and unbelievably, it's his first novel. I mean, that kind of thing makes you feel, well, I suppose it makes me realise that obviously I'm not a genius because there's no way I could do this, certainly not with my first novel, and he clearly is. And just to show you a kind of picture of the inside, can you see that? It's written as these small vignettes. There are 117 of them, and we know that because they're numbered. So like very, very short chapters, almost like, I don't know, micro essays or something. And it's basically about Mrs. Bridge and her domestic life in 1930s Kansas City. So on the surface, like nothing happens, right? She's just at home. Occasionally she gets into a fight with the washing machine, or she kind of instructs the maid on things to do. They have a cocktail party, or they might go to the country club for dinner. Well, on the outside, so much is happening. The Second World War happens. And I guess also because it was written in the 50s, there's this sort of nuclear threat kind of retrospectively realised. You do get these glimpses of the big, scary world. I mean, the Second World War is sort of so kept out of it that unbelievably she's got to Europe finally in her sort of very domestic world. They have this holiday, they get to Europe and they have to retreat because war breaks out. But it's so contained, it's so minimal, and the emphasis is so on her home rather than the chaos of the rest of the world. But it does occasionally rupture. You get these glimpses of characters who kind of fall through the cracks, who don't stick to the strict rules of respectable domestic life. There's this boy Tarquin who he learns sort of murdered his parents, or Gadsby, her art teacher, who's shown to be really impoverished. So you get these glimpses of what's out there if you dare to step beyond the confines of this kind of gilded cage. It's kind of terrifying, actually, as well as being very funny. I mean, I'm really looking forward to hearing how you found the sort of tone and sort of energy and emotion of the book. Was it very painful and tragic, or funny, or arch, or how did you feel as you were reading it? Or maybe you're feeling all those things at once. But one thing I would really like to talk about here is this very strange thing that goes on with time in this book. I'm really interested in time, and I'm so aware that time goes at different speeds at different moments. So I think I've mentioned this on here before, but things like when the children are brushing their teeth and we have this egg timer for 2 minutes, and that 2 minutes has got to be the longest 2 minutes in the world. But sometimes, when you're maybe in a sort of absorbed in a piece of work or something, time just flies by. You sort of look up and 2 hours has gone. You've been kind of in the flow, in the zone. Um, so time's just such a strange thing, and I'm I'm really interested in things that explore that, um, the kind of elasticity of time. And I think that this book really does that because it kind of has two different time things going on at once. And Joshua Ferris, who wrote the afterword for it, is on Radio 4's Open Book, and he talks about this really well. Um, on the one hand, time like flies by. So when we first meet Mrs. Bridge, her children are very young, I think, or maybe they haven't even been born. But you get this feeling of very, very young children who she's looking after. And as the book progresses, um, they've grown up and sort of left home, and one of them sort of having her own child. So a whole generation passes in these pages, um, and yet at the same time, time moves so slowly, and she has so much time and like struggles to fill it. That is part of the existential kind of dread that she sort of lies in bed. She doesn't want to get out of bed because she knows there's nothing to do. And I mean, I guess this gets worse as more and more machines arrive. But she has this maid who does everything for her. And in the end, there's this brilliant chapter where she's like, "Oh, thank God, I can go and get the car waxed. That's something to do." And then she's like completely squashed when the maid says, Mr. Bridge already did that. So time to fill, and yet she never manages to fill it with anything meaningful. And I was just going to read out this particular moment, which I think captures that a bit. It's number four, vignette number 45, and it's called The Clock. We've actually also just got a grandfather clock here up and running. So again, these chimes feel quite magical in a way. If you think things like Good Night, not Good Night, Mr. Tom, Tom's Midnight Garden, again, another instance of time doing funny things. Okay, sorry, I can hear Alfie chewing on something. She spent a great deal of time staring into space, oppressed by the sense that she was waiting. But waiting for what? She did not know. Surely someone would call. Someone must be needing her. Yet each day proceeded like the one before. Nothing intense, nothing desperate ever happened. Time did not move. The home, the city, the nation, and life itself were eternal. Still, she had a foreboding that one day, without warning and without pity, all the dear important things would be destroyed. So it was that her thoughts now and then turned deviously deeper, spiralling down and down in search of the final recess of life more immutable than the life she had bequeathed in the birth of her children. One fathomless instant occurred on a windy, rainy night when Harriet had gone to church, that's the maid, and the children were out, and only she and her husband remained at home. For some time, perhaps an hour or more, they had been reading separately. He had the financial page of the newspaper, and she had been idly reading of the weddings that day. The rain blew softly against the window panes, shutters rattled, and above the front door the tin weather stripping began to moan. Mrs. Bridge, with the newspaper in her lap, listened to the rumbling and booming of thunder over the house. Suddenly, in total quiet, the room was illuminated by lightning. Mr. Bridge lifted his head, only that and nothing more. But within Mrs. Bridge something stirred. She looked at her husband intently. "Did the clock strike?" he asked. "No, I don't believe so," she answered, waiting. He cleared his throat. He adjusted his glasses. He continued reading. She never forgot this moment. when she had almost apprehended the very meaning of life, and of the stars and planets, yes, and the flight of the earth. Almost apprehended, but she doesn't quite. And there are moments, other moments like that. There's one moment where she picks up a bit of Conrad, and again, sort of really thinking about this feeling of skimming life, skimming the meaning of life, and not being able to get into it. Or she tries to take up Spanish, but something distracts her, something interrupts. She has this time, and she can't kind of make good use of it or meaningful use of it. And of course, she symbolizes so much, and I think her question the question raised here of what are we doing with our lives, is obviously still totally relevant today, 100 years on after this was set. 100 years? What year? No, 90 years after it was set, sorry. Um, yes, we hopefully are not living this kind of grim life of a housewife with nothing to do. But yet, I think, especially as world events go on around us on such a sort of massive scale, whether that's war or climate change or, whatever sort of big issue is going on, one's own life can feel so incredibly small. And what one does with it can feel, possibly quite pointless. Um, so, yes, time in this book, and this book is so of its time and yet still so relevant today. It's an amazing book, and it takes not much time at all to read it. It's so thin. But I really think it will be a book that stays with you, and I can't wait to hear how you all got on with it. So, yes, this is the October book, Mrs. Bridge by Evan S. Connell for Emily's Walking Book Club. Our November book, I think I've got over, where is it? It's over here. So the next one is going to be The Past Is Myself by Christabel Bielenberg. Another interesting book about time and the Second World War and around there, but very, very different. So that's in November, but for now, looking forward to hearing your thoughts on Mrs. Bridge. Thank you so much.